We've seen a range of data in a number of contexts now that consistently show worse outcomes for African Americans. And I want to argue that, in fact, African Americans inhabit an entirely distinct welfare state, and that we should distinguish between that African American welfare state and the experience that white Americans have had and the ways in which they interact with government over the course of our history. Now, before we do that, and I turn to that larger historical argument, let's just quickly review some of the data that show that difference. So, African American poverty rates are higher, of course, and historically always have been. Unemployment rates, too, have been higher, and there's been little change in that reality even since the advances of the 1960s. Household income for blacks is almost half that of whites. Total wealth of African American households is 1/20th that of white households. What do you see going on here? And that disparity is true also for wealthier African Americans. The wealthiest African Americans have total wealth at 1/4 the level of the wealthiest whites. And poor blacks have 1/5 the wealth of poor whites. African Americans and Hispanics are much more likely to work in poverty wage jobs, much less likely to move up the income ladder over the course of their lives. They are less likely to have higher levels of education, and that, given what we know about the relationship between education and income, should help explain some of these other outcomes, perhaps. But even better educated African Americans receive less benefit from that education than do their white counterparts. Black children are much more likely to live in areas of concentrated poverty, and almost half of all African American children do so, compared to just 12% of white children. They are, moreover, much more likely to attend segregated schools, to lack health insurance, even after the Affordable Care Act, to live shorter lives, and to die before they reach their first birthday. The list could go on, but you get the grim idea.